She abandoned her autistic son without regret. Years later, she returned for his $4.8 million fortune, believing he was still weak, silent, and broken. She had no idea. The boy she left behind had been waiting for this moment his entire life. David was born different. Noise scared him. Crowds overwhelmed him. Doctors called it autism, but his mother called it a mistake. She felt embarrassed when people looked at him. Her friends stopped visiting. Her dreams felt ruined. Slowly, resentment replaced love. One evening, she packed her bags and left. No goodbye, no apology. Just an empty house and a silent child standing near the door. David waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into years. She never returned. His father became everything: protector, teacher, shield. He worked long hours, came home exhausted, but every night he sat beside David, teaching him patience instead of anger. David learned early that the world was not kind to people like him. School was cruel. Children mocked his silence. Teachers misunderstood his behavior. He spoke less, but he noticed more. Patterns and numbers felt safer than people's faces. Logic made sense when emotions didn't. While others slept, David learned alone. Old computers, broken screens, free lessons online. Failure didn't frustrate him. Silence helped him focus. Years passed quietly. Then one winter night, his father collapsed at work. No warning. No second chance. David stood alone at the funeral, surrounded by strangers. That day, something changed inside him. He stopped hoping. He started planning. With nothing left to lose, David worked harder than ever. Freelance jobs, late nights, endless rejections. People paid him less, underestimated him, ignored him. He accepted everything without complaint. Slowly, his work began to speak for him. He built systems others couldn't understand, predicted outcomes others couldn't see. Companies noticed. Money came quietly, then faster, then all at once. By the time the world finally learned his name, David was worth $4.8 million. News articles spread his story. Silent genius, they called him. And that's when she saw him. The woman who abandoned him returned with tears and excuses. She spoke of regret, of mistakes, of love she never showed. David listened without emotion. He let her stay. He let her talk. He let her believe she had been forgiven. But David was no longer the child she left behind. Every word she spoke revealed her greed. Every question exposed her intentions. She thought she was clever. She thought silence meant weakness. She was wrong. David documented everything, calmly, legally, patiently. He never raised his voice, never showed anger. When the truth finally came out, it destroyed her. Friends turned away. Opportunities disappeared. Her past caught up with her. David didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He simply walked away. Because the strongest revenge is not hate. It's becoming untouchable.
After his mother returned, David's life did not suddenly change. On the outside, everything looked calm. Inside, the storm was growing. David allowed her to stay, but he never opened his heart. He spoke politely, briefly, carefully. He watched her the same way he used to watch people as a child, quietly, deeply, without blinking. She tried to act like a caring mother. She cooked meals he never asked for. She touched his shoulder like she still had a right to do so. She spoke about memories that never really existed. David remembered the truth. He remembered the nights he cried alone. He remembered the empty chair at school events. He remembered the day his father died and no one came for him. She noticed his silence and mistook it for weakness. She believed autism still controlled him. She believed time had erased her sins. Slowly, she started asking questions. At first, they were harmless. How does your business work? Do you manage everything alone? Where do you invest your money? David answered carefully, enough to satisfy her curiosity, not enough to reveal anything real. At night, when she slept, David reviewed contracts, assets, records. He organized his life the way he always had, through order and control. The more she spoke, the clearer her intentions became. She complained about her struggles, her failures, her loneliness. She painted herself as a victim. David never argued, never corrected her lies. He simply listened. One evening, she mentioned money directly for the first time. She spoke about family responsibility and how a mother deserved security after everything she had been through. David looked at her face. He saw no love, only calculation. That night, he began preparing quietly. He started documenting conversations, saving messages, tracking behavior, not out of hatred, but out of clarity. Days passed. Her patience faded. Her questions became sharper. She wanted access, control, influence. David gave her none. Instead, he let her believe she was getting closer, let her think he depended on her emotionally, let her believe she still mattered. Inside, David felt nothing, because the boy who once waited at the door for his mother was gone, and what remained was someone who never forgot.
With every passing day, her behavior began to change. The kindness slowly faded. The softness in her voice disappeared. Patience was replaced with irritation. She started judging David's decisions, questioning his lifestyle, advising him on money he earned without her. She spoke like she had rights again. David noticed everything. The way her eyes followed his phone, the way she listened when he spoke to lawyers, the way she suddenly cared about numbers and documents. One afternoon, she crossed a line. She asked for access, not directly, cleverly. She suggested helping him manage accounts, claimed she wanted to protect his future. David felt no anger, only clarity. He remembered how she once said he would never survive without her. Now she needed him to survive. That night, David adjusted his routine, changed passwords, moved assets, created layers she could never understand. She believed she was becoming important. In reality, she was being isolated. Days later, she tried emotional manipulation. She cried. She blamed his father. She blamed life. She said abandoning him was a mistake, but never said she was sorry. David realized something then. She didn't regret leaving. She regretted missing the reward. From that moment, David stopped pretending emotionally. He became colder, more distant. She sensed it. Fear appeared for the first time in her eyes. She pushed harder, demanded answers, demanded trust. David remained silent, because silence was no longer protection. It was control, and control was something she had never expected him to have.
She could feel it now. The distance, the shift in power. David no longer explained himself, no longer reacted to her emotions. He listened, observed, and decided in silence. That terrified her. She began making careless mistakes. She pushed conversations toward money more often. She complained about her life, her debts, her failures. One night she spoke without thinking. She said it wasn't fair that he had everything while she had nothing. The words hung in the air. David looked at her calmly. For the first time, he asked a question. "Where were you when I had nothing?" She froze. That moment revealed everything. From that day, David made his first move. Quiet, invisible. He contacted people from her past. Old employers, old friends. Patterns emerged. Lies repeated. Stories didn't match. She had abandoned more than just him. She had burned bridges everywhere. David didn't confront her. He didn't need to. He invited her into meetings, let her hear half-truths, let her feel important. She believed she was gaining control. In reality, David was mapping her weaknesses, her fear of exposure, her need for validation, her desperation for money. She started speaking too much, trusting too easily. She thought the door back into his life was opening. She didn't realize she was walking into a room with no exit.
She was no longer patient. The calm mask she wore began to crack. Her questions became demands. Her concern turned into control. She started checking David's schedule, asking where he was going, who he was meeting, why he didn't tell her everything. David noticed the change immediately. He answered less, spoke slower, gave her nothing she could use. That made her anxious. One evening, she confronted him directly. She said family should not keep secrets. She said a mother deserved trust. David looked at her quietly. Trust was something she had abandoned long ago. She tried another tactic. Guilt. She spoke about giving birth to him, about suffering, about sacrifice. David felt nothing. Pain had taught him not to confuse biology with love. Behind the scenes, David tightened the net. He adjusted legal structures, separated accounts, placed barriers she could never cross. She sensed something slipping away. Control, opportunity, fear returned to her eyes. She began acting carefully again, but it was too late. David was no longer reacting to her moves. She was reacting to his silence, and silence was crushing her.
She thought she was clever. She believed she could manipulate him. She believed he was still the silent, weak boy from years ago. David let her think that. He smiled politely, answered questions vaguely, nodded when she suggested ideas, pretended she had influence. But behind that calm exterior, he was planning meticulously. He documented every lie she told, every slip of the tongue, every greedy word she muttered when she thought no one was listening. He started involving legal counsel subtly, preparing contracts, proof, and evidence she didn't even know existed. She pushed for financial access. She tried to control the distribution of his assets. She asked about investments, his savings, and property. David appeared naive. She felt victorious. Her confidence grew. That was her biggest mistake. David began planting seeds of trust, making her feel like she was indispensable, encouraging her to talk freely. And she did. She revealed intentions, exposed greed, admitted shortcuts she had taken in life. David kept every word. Each lie, each plan she made was quietly stored, ready to be used at the perfect moment. By now, she had fallen completely into his trap. She thought she controlled him, but in truth, he controlled everything. Silence was no longer passive. It was the weapon that would destroy her.
Days turned into weeks. She had grown comfortable, believing she was indispensable. She laughed at small jokes. She shared stories about herself. She believed she was finally back in control of David's life. But David had been watching for years. Every move she made, every word she spoke, every glance he caught, it was recorded, analyzed, and stored. He had become invisible to her eyes, yet omnipresent in every detail she exposed. One afternoon, he invited her to the office. A formal meeting, he said. She dressed elegantly, wore makeup, and smiled as if she owned the room. He greeted her warmly, polite, calm, composed. She began her routine, the questions about money, the subtle manipulation. She tried to charm him. She tried to guilt him. She tried to remind him of the past. David listened. He nodded occasionally. He asked questions that seemed harmless, but they were carefully designed traps. Every response she gave was recorded, every facial expression analyzed. She started speaking faster. Excitement turned into anxiety. She thought she was gaining the upper hand, and that's when David decided it was time. He leaned forward, spoke softly, deliberately. "You've said a lot about money, about trust, about your sacrifices. Thank you. I've been keeping track." Her smile faltered. She didn't understand. He continued, "I've documented everything, every word, every intention, every lie." Her hands trembled. She tried to laugh. She tried to deflect. David placed a folder on the table. Legal documents, audio recordings, evidence of her greed and manipulation. "Everything you've done to me, every attempt to control me, I have proof. And it's going public." Her face went pale. She stammered. She begged. She tried to explain, to manipulate once more. But this time, David did not react. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't yell. He simply stood up, collected his belongings, and left the room. Her world collapsed silently. No one to defend her. No one to forgive her. No one left to save her pride. David walked away, calm, collected, untouchable. The child she abandoned had become the man who destroyed everything she ever wanted. Silence, patience, and intelligence had won, and she realized too late that the son she abandoned was never weak. He had only been waiting for the perfect moment.
Days passed after David revealed the proof. News articles began circulating. Social media picked it up. The woman's lies, greed, and manipulation were exposed to the world. She had imagined power. She had imagined control. But now, everywhere she turned, she faced judgment. Old friends ignored her calls.
Business partners questioned her ethics. Her reputation, carefully built over decades, crumbled like sand. And yet she still thought she could appeal to David. She came to him, desperate, tears streaming down her face, voice trembling. "David, I made mistakes. I was wrong. Please forgive me." David looked at her. No anger, no hatred, only calm. "You had a choice once," he said softly. "You chose to leave me, to abandon a child who loved you blindly. You chose greed over family. I will not repeat your mistakes." He handed her back her documents, the evidence she had hoped to manipulate him with. "This is everything you tried to hide. It's all yours now, as proof of who you really are." She begged. She cried. She tried to manipulate, to charm, to guilt. But David's patience had already won. No words, no tears, no excuses could undo what had been done. Outside, the world watched. Her failures exposed. Her plans foiled. Her life changed forever. David walked away calmly. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to humiliate her publicly. The truth had done the work. Silence, patience, and intelligence had destroyed the woman who abandoned him. And as he looked out the window of his office, David realized something important. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about strategy, about waiting, about letting time reveal the truth. He smiled quietly. The boy she had underestimated was now a man she could never undo. And in that quiet smile, David knew the final lesson had been taught. Never underestimate the one you abandon.
The world had turned against her. Every lie she had ever told was now public knowledge. Friends, colleagues, and even distant relatives began to distance themselves. She tried to rebuild her reputation. She called journalists, attempted interviews, and even tried to bribe some business partners. But the damage was permanent. The woman who once controlled everyone around her was now powerless. Meanwhile, David continued to operate in silence. He didn't celebrate her failures openly. He didn't need to. He had already achieved the victory that mattered. She came to his office one last time, desperate, trembling, pleading. Her eyes were red, face pale. "David, please, I can change. I can fix this." David looked at her calmly, not a trace of emotion. "You had every chance to do the right thing," he said slowly. "You chose greed over love. You abandoned me when I needed you most. All the apologies in the world won't change that." She sank into a chair, powerless, her words now meaningless, her tears now irrelevant. Outside, the media had already begun reporting her downfall. Social media had torn apart her public image. Businesses she had once trusted were closing doors. David's revenge was complete, not through anger, not through violence, but through patience, intelligence, and strategy. And in that silence, she understood finally. The boy she had thrown away had grown into a man who could not be fooled, controlled, or manipulated. For the first time in her life, she felt the true weight of her choices. David didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply walked away from her office, his life intact, stronger, and finally free from the shadow of the woman who had abandoned him. And as he stepped out into the sunlight, he knew that true revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reclaiming your power.
Months had passed since the world had witnessed her downfall. Her reputation was shattered, her lies exposed, her power gone. David's life, in contrast, had never been stronger. His business thrived, his wealth grew. But more importantly, he had peace, something she had never given him. She tried one last time to reconnect. She sent letters, emails, even personal visits. Every attempt was met with calm silence. David had no anger, no desire for confrontation. Because revenge, he realized, was never about making her suffer. It was about healing himself, about reclaiming his life. He had used patience, intelligence, and strategy, not violence, not cruelty, but the power of control and silence. One evening, David stood by the window of his office. The city stretched out below him. The sun was setting. He thought of his childhood, of the nights he cried alone, of the mother who left him.
of the father who gave everything to protect him. And he smiled, not with joy over her pain, but with pride over his journey. The boy who was abandoned had become a man who was untouchable. The boy who was underestimated had become the one who could never be underestimated. In the end, the lesson was clear. Abandonment does not define you. Patience can become your greatest weapon. Intelligence, strategy, and calm resolve will always outmatch greed and manipulation. David walked away from the past. He was free. He was whole. And the woman who tried to destroy him? She had lost everything, because the strongest revenge is not anger. It is reclaiming your life and rising above those who once abandoned you.